Hi, welcome back to episode 5 of Into Deep podcast with me, Alyssa. In this podcast, we go a little too deep into everything feminism. In this episode, we're talking about marriage. Yeah, I'm gonna go straight into it. I put a poll up on the last episode asking whether people wanted an episode on marriage or male directors, and marriage won. So that's what this episode is going to be about. As a feminist, there seems to be a few controversial takes that I have that other feminists don't necessarily agree with. One is definitely sex work, and in that same vein, surrogacy, which I already talked about a few episodes ago in terms of sex work. Sexual kinks and their innate misogyny is another. A big one is definitely veganism. Never ask a supposed progressive person their stance on veganism, because I've never seen people more hate-filled than when they find out I don't eat cow. And at least to me, veganism and feminism are the same thing. So, I'll definitely do an episode on that, but in this episode, we're talking about another one of my controversial takes, maybe, although I don't think it should be. And that is marriage. I don't want to be too mean, but the cognitive dissonance of saying you're a feminist, then being married or being pro-marriage, I guess being pro-marriage, because I don't think necessarily people have to go through the effort of being divorced, but being pro-marriage and aiming to get married in the future and saying you're a feminist, I don't really know how that makes sense in your brain. And hopefully in this episode, I can convince you to no longer ever want to engage in the institution of marriage. Please. 90% of my information for this episode comes from my feminist Bible, I Don't, The Case Against Marriage by Clementine Ford. This book, potentially the most life-changing book I've ever read. It's just so perfect. Side note, I'm still so sick right now and I keep having to edit out me coughing in these podcasts because I can't leave that in, but I have a long COVID or something. I don't know, I've had this for 2 months. Anyway, the way this book is set up, the way it's chaptered is so good. I don't find myself anymore really feeling like I'm unable to put a book down. When I was in primary school, I would be reading books. I would get told off for reading too much during class, and it was just because I was I don't want to stop reading. When you never want to put the book down, it's so good. I feel that book was one of the books where I just wanted to keep reading, and it was so interesting and so well written. And another really good quality of it is that it's really funny, and I think that's what makes it different as well to a lot of other feminist or theory books that I've read, because it's also just really silly and funny. The only other book with the title of me not being able to put it down besides this one is probably Babel by R.F. Kuang. That book was also really good. Anyway, Clementine introduces this book with a reference to a video that went viral in 2023 of this disgusting, gross man's marriage vows. This honestly leads on from my last episode, Married at First Sight, because some of those vows are also disgusting. Anyway, the woman in this video, and I'm sure you've probably seen it, it was kind of everywhere on TikTok, maybe start of 2023, I'm not really sure. She is talking in her vows, the bride is talking in her vows about he is making her fairy tale dream come true. They have 2 daughters together and they're finally getting married. His vows are the ones where he then says, only 2 things are required to make me happy: keep my belly full and my bowls empty. Moment of silence. Yeah, I don't even he should have been sniped from a distance as soon as he said that. That's low-key like sexual harassment. Like to your wife at your wedding in your vows. But we're gonna go about why that's not really a surprise to me. I remember this video going viral, particularly because for some reason I remember Curtis Connor doing a podcast episode about it. He actually made another video as well about like grooms ruining their wedding day by doing things like smashing cake in the bride's face even when she explicitly said not to, and probably spent hundreds of dollars on a makeup artist for the wedding she's probably single-handedly been planning for years. Women getting embarrassed and ridiculed by not only their soon-to-be husbands but anyone else in attendance at the wedding like isn't anything new. Whether it's in the vows or the speeches, there's bound to be some like freakish offhand comment about sex or her sexual ability or her ability to be a good wife and like provide, her ability to cook, her ability to clean. Like there's always a freakish comment about that, and that's because that's literally just what marriage is. Like you can't separate these gender roles from what marriage was originally made to be, even if you're having a supposed unique and woke wedding. The thing is, as well, is that most normal men, of which maybe there's not that many, but they think they're so far removed from this guy. Like that Curtis Connor podcast, he's making a whole video making fun of how much this guy sucks. But it's like, Curtis, you're still married yourself. Get off your high horse. Like, I know that you're like not gonna say that in your wedding vows, but taking part in marriage at all is misogynistic. Sorry, I'm just telling it how it is. Like, I actually do like his videos, so don't get me wrong, but he's in Australia right now, and my sister saw him live in Melbourne and he had some part of his show where he was saying how sex work is real work or something, and like not really a crazy comment to make, like whatever, it's not, obviously there's levels to that and it's more serious than just being like sex work is work, especially coming from like a male YouTuber comedian. But just like stay in your own lane. I don't know why he would even feel the need to talk about that. But men like this think they're so different and so like removed from supposed bad men, but you're still doing things every day to uphold the patriarchy. So like relax, like you're not special. You're still a man at the end of the day. Perhaps one of the main reasons I push feminism, not to be too vulnerable on the pod, but for me growing up and especially in high school, I was quite outspoken, I want to say, and like I was constantly humiliated and ridiculed for so many things for being a feminist, especially like at my school. Even though I went to school from high school 2015 to like 2020, there were so many things that happened that were just like so fucked up. Like I remember maybe year 9, all of these guys were going around and asking all the girls in my year if they were feminists, and if they said yes, they would just like bully them or start arguments or I don't know, make like misogynistic comments. And it's like, these kids were like 14 and they were already pushing misogyny and exerting their power over women in that way. And it was like, obviously when I get asked that, I was like, yeah. And my reasoning, and I feel like this was going around a lot at that time as well, like feminism being about equality, which like to a degree I guess is true, but when you say things like that, it kind of like waters down the movement, because it's not really about just making things equal, it's about restructuring a lot of things to make that possible. And so I'd be asked like, are you a feminist? And I was like, well, yeah, because feminism is actually just about equality. And I would get like literally like humiliated for saying things like that. Like, what the hell? We had so many other instances of like really misogynistic things happening as well. Like, what's it called? Like bra snapping. when they like pull on people's bra straps. I remember that happening again in like year 9. And also just the amount of horrific things that like men would say, I mean boys would say about girls in school. And it's just like, I'm expected now to be friendly with the same sort of guys who were doing things like that in school. And understandable, I guess, if they've taken years and years to unlearn all of that like awful misogynistic thinking that is just automatically socialized into you when you're born male. But I know for a fact that they haven't put any effort into actually unlearning these things seriously. I think when it was no longer acceptable to act like that, they kind of just pretend that they're not still like that. But like, I know that you haven't put in enough effort to change how you were in high school. I know that you still think all of these things. So why am I expected to be friendly with the same sorts of guys that were like doing just disgusting things towards women in high school? Like, no, I'm not. Like, I'm not going to settle for that. One of the points Clementine brings up a lot in this book as well is the notion of every time you stand up to any kind of male power, you're either met with some kind of punishment, like physical violence, even just like verbal attacks. But more commonly, especially in online spaces, you're met with insults, which are usually just extremely sexual, misogynistic, and like crass. I think personally, I haven't really had too many insults like this. And you know why? Because I'm so young and probably getting my perceived naivety sexualized by any loser old man who wants to comment on the things I say. Because I'm so young, I feel like they think, oh, I'll just grow out of it. So it's like they don't have to make all these like disgusting comments towards me. And the comments that I mean, and I think Clementine probably has to deal with so many of these, like she gets harassed relentlessly by men online because she's at an age where marriage is expected by men. So if you're unmarried and you're like over 30, they bring out these insults like, oh, you're just pissed because no one will marry you. You're just angry because no one wants to have sex with you. Like, you're just angry because you're fat and ugly. Like, it's like, even if this woman is beautiful to them, they're still going to say that because it's just like, it's such an easy out for them to win whatever argument they're having just by putting down the woman so much that she probably doesn't even want to respond to someone that's stupid. I actually really like the introductory chapter for this book. A good quote from it is, "Marriage and everything it steals from women, our time, our energy, our freedom, has constituted one of the biggest and most successful use of these lies. The lies being those we've been told as women to keep supporting a patriarchal system, to keep subscribing to the expectations that men hold against us under a patriarchy. Marriage in its simplest form is a life of service, which used to be taken by force, by just marrying off like 14-year-old girls to old men so that they can be given babies and a chef and a cleaner," which, just to add, like, child marriage is still illegal in a lot of countries. Personally, I would never want to take part in an institution that still pushes for marriage to children to be allowed, but sure. Marriage is instead now sold as a lie to women as something we need, and not vice versa. Marriage was and is still an institution which assists men. But we get sold this idea that a wedding is a girl's dream day, and men are the ones that need convincing to become engaged to women. Like, you know, they're like, oh, the old ball and chain. But realistically, the one who's benefiting the most from that marriage is the man. And like, this is backed up by statistics all the time. It always shows that married women with children are the least happy. Single women who are not married and do not have children are the most happy. Like, why do you think that is? Because most women in marriages, and oftentimes it's not just the marriage itself, even regardless of marriage, sometimes men and women will fall into gender roles after they have children, because the man doesn't want a child because he wants something to love. He wants some child as like a status symbol. And the woman automatically falls into a caring role for this child because he's not going to do it. And because we're not evil, like some men are, yeah, the woman ends up taking the nurturing role because the man refuses to do anything. And that's obviously not necessarily happening in all marriages, because it's a combination of not just marriage but also having children as well, which typically leads to the worst outcomes for women's happiness. But I digress. Engagement itself is another lie sold to women. Women only want to be engaged nowadays and married, I guess, because it gives some legal backing to their relationship. It makes it seem real, I guess, for lack of a better word, and kind of alleviates the anxiety that a lot of women feel when they're not able to trust the man that they're dating. It kind of alleviates the anxiety that he could be cheating or that he's constantly looking for a better woman to leave her for, which again ties into the women hating each other narrative, which I also discussed last episode in relation to reality TV catfights and generally just fighting over boys. But I think that's what is another issue with engagement. When you see like celebrity couples online, people are like, when's he gonna put a ring on it? Because for some reason, without an engagement and without marriage, it's not like a real relationship. In a relationship, you should be able to trust that your partner's not like cheating on you without having to have some legal document binding you together. I mean, also he could just be cheating while you're married anyway, so that doesn't even make any sense. Even like having children out of wedlock, still like somewhat controversial, although it's obviously a lot more common now. Also, this is a side note that's like completely unrelated, but I'm a really big Sims franchise fan. Yeah, like the Sims 1, Sims 2, Sims 3. Potentially like some of the best games ever made. I used to play The Sims 3 all the time, and my favorite expansion pack was The Sims 3 Late Night, which added celebrities, vampires, and this new world, which was based on New York. Like, it was so good. But every time I'd have a celebrity sim, like, she would have a baby or something, and then there'd be all these tabloids about her having a baby out of wedlock. And I didn't know what wedlock was, and everyone would be like making rumors up about my sim, and I was like, bro, what is wedlock? Like, I don't understand. So that's the story of how I found out what wedlock means. Yep. The problem that Clementine identifies in this book is that the same institution that has dehumanized and used women as slaves essentially for hundreds of years is now being sold as the life goal, as something that women need, or we like crave, or like all women want to get married and have a beautiful wedding and a white dress. And so it's essentially being sold to you as this romanticized lie in order to keep women wanting to subscribe to married life, even though it leads to them doing all of this unpaid emotional and physical labor because the man just doesn't want to do anything once he's like locked down this woman to do it for him. Something I've noticed online recently as well, and this is another instance of the Madonna whore complex, which just keeps popping up everywhere these days. I wonder why. I also found out recently that was identified by Freud. Sometimes he really got things right, but generally just like with the wrong reasoning. Anyway, a lot of discourse on Twitter recently about supposed Puritan culture rising. This really PMO. Like this really, I just had to pause my recording because my mum came home and she bought me Dutch lollies. Anyway, we're back. This Puritan culture thing pisses me off so much, particularly the term Puritan. Yes, Puritan like teenager, which has been going around too. And I say going around like an illness, and honestly it is. It's literally disgusting. It's kind of just like freaks on the internet who think sexual liberation is the most important thing ever and have an issue with teenagers who aren't sexually active. Yeah, it's as crazy as it sounds. That Gracie Abrams interview that I was talking about last week, where she said porn is bullshit and a lie, people were genuinely saying that she was a pure teen, even though she's like 25. And there was going to be a pure teen to try to write Pipeline. That's apparently a real thing that people thought would happen. Typically, this term, Puritan or Puritine, is being used for people who have very valid critiques of porn and sex work and get called Puritan for it. I honestly do not see a single area where Puritanism even exists to any degree outside of like religion these days. Honestly, I don't even want to discuss that more because it annoys me so much. Like, any critique against sex work or the porn industry is immediately called Puritan, when it's like, no, the reason these things are problems is because they disallow people from being sexually liberated. When you have an industry that thrives off exploiting women and pushes things like pedophilia and rape, obviously that system is not allowing people to be sexually liberated. It's doing the opposite, actually. So calling someone a Puritan for being against things like that, like, anyway, the argument people have is that they think Gen Z isn't progressive enough because as a whole, that generation has less sex than previous generations. And yeah, some of that is maybe attributable to the fact that many people in that age demographic never learned social skills. But for me and for most other women that I know that are like this, we keep our distance from men because they sexualize us endlessly, often without consent, and because staying away from men and denying them easy access to you is just a way to avoid an avoidable trauma. Like, it's not because we're like puritanical. It's it's because it's a self-preservation sort of thing, I guess. Like, I don't see where that argument comes from. And this is another side to that Madonna whore complex. Men simultaneously want women to be married to one man, and that's it. But they also want them to be sexually active and sexually liberated. I don't know. When women online say they're anti-marriage, they get called whores because men think that we're anti-marriage because we're anti being in a relationship with just one person. Like, they think that we don't want to pick just one guy to marry because we're dragging along multiple at once by taking advantage of their sexuality and being like enticing and like essentially being like a witch who uses sexuality to take advantage of men. And that's why we don't want to settle down with just one of them, because we want to use all of these men. I like, you have to be actually clinically insane to be thinking like that, but there's many people online who do. The trend I've noticed in real women, I know in real life, the ones who are least likely to get married are also the least sexually active. Like, that is what makes more sense, because both cases are for the same reason. We don't want to be around freakish men, particularly in a romantic way, because we don't want to be around them. Like, under either marriage or hookup culture, it's the same reasoning. We don't want to be around men who don't understand consent or treat women like second-class citizens. Like, you say things like that you're against marriage and you're simultaneously a slut and a Puritan. Like, I saw a tweet the other day about a woman saying why she was against marriage, and people in the comments were like, enjoy the STDs, like thinking that she's the type of person who sleeps around so much that she doesn't want to get married. It's like, no, this girl probably doesn't talk to any men, actually. Like, you actually can't win with things like that. Clementine mentions in her book that she's a marriage abolitionist. She doesn't believe that marriage can be co-opted to mean something else just because you're not wearing white, or you eloped, or you proposed to him, or because you're gay. I don't care about same-sex marriage. Why would you want to take part in an institution that has not only been used to enslave women, but also has worked so hard to exclude gay people for hundreds of years. Like, I just don't understand why you would want to take part in something that has been pushed to be a union between man and woman for that long. Like, and not even a union between man and woman, a union between man and slave. Like, why would you want to take part in that? I understand it to some extent, but I don't think being in a same-sex relationship gives you any more leeway when it comes to marriage than being in a straight relationship does. Like, I don't care. Why would you want to take part in an institution as well which allowed constant sexual access of a man to his wife up until pretty recently? Marital rape was still legal in parts of Australia up until 1994 and is still completely legal in a lot of places in the world as well. Like, I just don't think you can separate marriage from all of its negativities just because it's something that you've decided that you want to do. A feminist theory professor at RMIT in Melbourne was quoted saying, just because you're a feminist and getting married, marriage doesn't become feminist. She has an essay about rejecting marital norms, I guess. She argues that only the death of marriage can bring about the hope of more genuine equality for all. And that's the thing, like, when it comes to choice feminism, just because you're choosing to get married doesn't mean it's an okay thing to do, because you're still upholding marriage, and marriage is such a cornerstone in a patriarchal society that you're not actually doing anything feminist. If anything, you're doing something very anti-feminist. Historically, marriage is part of the chokehold Judeo-Christianism has on every aspect of gender expectations for men and women, and honestly every aspect of societal expectations as well. To some degree, I would understand getting married if you're religious, but religion is far from safe from criticism by me, by the way, but I will save that for another time. But if you're not religious, why are you getting married? Like, marriage is entwined and inseparable from religion. If you get married, you're taking part in a religious Bible God-driven ceremony, which is entrenched in the belief that men own women. Here is a fun quote from you guys, which is actually from Clementine's book, but also from the Bible. This is about a newly married woman if she is unable to provide proof of virginity via blood on her wedding night. First of all, from a health standpoint, the hymen isn't always indicative of virginity anyway, so clearly they didn't know this in 5 BC, because that doesn't even mean anything. But anyway, here's the quote. She shall be brought to the door of her father's house, and the men of her city shall stone her with stones that she die. That is just lovely. The Bible is such a beautiful text. Actually, in some parts of the Bible, marriage isn't even recommended. For men who are unmarried, either it's recommended for them to turn to God and put all of their energy into serving God. But if they're unable to resist those temptations, then it's better that they be married than just be tempted their whole life or whatever. It's also not recommended for women because unmarried women are also able to devote their life to the church in some parts of the Bible, right? So, can they make up their mind? Is marriage recommended or not? I don't know. There's also other things about marriage which are a lot more recent than you might think, and which challenges the traditional expectations of marriage and a wedding, like the fact that wearing a white dress was a trend started by Queen Victoria when she married Prince Albert in a white gown in 1840. So when people say they want to have a traditional wedding, it's okay, so you want to have a Queen Victoria, Prince Albert in a white gown in 1840 wedding. 1840, not that traditional, not that long ago. And it's important to note that even early feminists were against marriage. And I do agree, marriage back then was worse than it is now, but I still don't think now you can separate it from that history, right? Mary Wollstonecraft, widely recognized as the first modern feminist, said, if marriage be the cement of society, mankind should all be educated after the same model, or the intercourse of the sexes will never deserve the name of fellowship. After she became pregnant in 1979, she married William Godwin. Obviously, she wasn't even immune to societal pressures. Even though she was such a vocal critic of marriage, she still couldn't avoid it under that society because she didn't have the right to as a woman. However, her husband, William Godwin, was a fellow radical, quoted saying marriage was a system of fraud and the worst of all laws. So I think we stand with him. She died giving birth to her second daughter. If you didn't know, Mary Shelley, author of Frankenstein. Clementine refers to this as a terrible irony given her resistance to the entrapment of marriage and the dangers that it can bring to women. Yeah, it is really sad. Also, this family had so much impact on feminism as a whole. I definitely want to do more into the impacts they had, especially on like veganism and feminist theory, very, very closely entwined. There was an article I found from, I think, UC Berkeley, The Changing Landscape of Love and Marriage, it was titled. Marriage in the US has historically been seen as the foundation for healthy families, communities, and vital for the functioning of society. But nowadays, nearly half of marriages end in divorce. Why? Not because the old ball and chain is driving their husbands crazy that they have to get divorced because women are crazy, but because women actually somewhat have rights. Conservative men, I think, will argue that families are getting destroyed and like, what about the children? But the reality is women are just as unhappy in marriages as they've always been. We just have the ability to not only understand that suffering, but also the ability to speak out about it, and now also the ability to divorce under no-fault divorces. Family scholar Andrew Cherlin suggested that we are witnessing the deinstitutionalization of marriage. And I love to hear it. This has been influenced by the rise of having children while not married, a changing division of labor in relationships, unmarried cohabitation, and same-sex marriage. This is what allows people to question the link between marriage and parenting, the idea of complementary gender roles as well. Marriage now only holds symbolic significance as a marker of achievement and status, which I've always found crazy. Like, it's not an achievement to get married, and why is it expected to receive gifts from people when you're getting married? Like, I literally don't care about the fact that you're legally entwined now. Like, that's not an achievement. Like, I don't understand. If I wanted to get married, I could probably do it by like next week. It's not that hard. Anthony Giddens wrote a book in 1992 titled The Transformation of Intimacy. He argues that intimacy is transforming from a model which stresses relationship permanence, like lifelong marriage, which can be trapping and is what makes marriages so unhappy, to a supposed confluent love model. This model essentially refers to relationships where partners establish trust through intense communication, but the possibility of a breakup is always there. These relationships produce greater happiness and foster a greater sense of autonomy and individualism. But because the permanence of the relationship is conditional, it can lead to insecurities which manifest in anxiety and addiction. I think that's a really good way to put it. There's many issues in relationships now too, but at least there's typically the option to leave, unlike marriages where divorce wasn't allowed. And other research has shown that people have changing views on intimacy, which is influenced by both their actual everyday experiences and how they actually feel, and the romantic love myth entrenched in the institution of marriage. Marriage is therefore what keeps the romantic or lifelong love model culturally relevant, even if it's not real and is often a romanticized view of what marriage was and is really like. People still have that influence of having their like soulmate, one lifelong person in terms of what a relationship should be. However, even though people say that that's what they want, it's not typically what they experience. This is honestly why I feel like romantic love should never have been the foundation of a family. Nowadays, Americans have established a pattern of, Americans and probably a lot of other Western countries as well, but this research was in America. Americans have established a pattern of high marriage and remarriage rates, which Chellan calls a carousel of intimate partnerships, which tend to have a very bad impact on the children they have due to constant changes and upheavals. Families, I think, should be more so built on a foundation of a strong community, because romantic love has such a tendency to be volatile. Research suggests that it's not divorce which is the issue in impacting children, it's the happiness of their parents' marriage. So an increase in divorce is only due to our increasing autonomy and ability to actually leave relationships that are unhappy. Like, the divorce itself isn't the issue, because children who have unhappy parents are like just as likely to have bad outcomes, like behavioral issues or lifelong problems with relationships. Like, that's not necessarily because of divorce. It can also just be because of an unhappy marriage between their parents. In a post by Paris Mendoir, by the way, I love her. I found her on Substack like near the end of last year, but she also posts a lot of excerpts from her Substack on TikTok. So in this one, she said, this is a long quote, but she said, Gen Z is on track to have less marriages and births than the previous generation. This is one of the first generations in history where women do not need men for any material security. Now that women have the luxury of not getting married, they choose men on the basis of the man's character and emotional contribution to their lives. On top of that, with the rise of the internet, women can see men's unfiltered thoughts, and what we're finding is that many of them agree with men like Andrew Tate and have porn addictions that makes them want to inflict violence on women. Why would we date them? And I think that sums up very well the change in intimacy expectations as well, but also the lack of a need for an institution like marriage, which is built in material exchange and having women as private property, when we don't need that anymore. We don't need a man to rely on for like material security, as she said. So it's not something that is necessary anymore. Okay, there was an essay published by the University of New South Wales sites about the ability of marriage to be feminist. I don't even want to shout out this essay because it annoyed me so much. It was just like, the author of this article said at the end, regarding Clementine Ford's book, I embarked on I Don't, sharing most of Ford's criticisms about marriage. And while I still share them, I also found reading it such an alienating experience that by the end I was tempted to get married just to prove her wrong. Okay, so clearly you're not as against marriage as you're saying then. She also references in this essay another book about the history of marriage that was written by a woman who is married to another woman. All supposed feminists who think marriage is okay under their specific circumstances always just sound like they're trying to convince themselves because they already got married and don't want to go back on it. Like, that's what it always sounds like to me. The argument about changing your last name is one which really shows that to me. In her book, Clementine says, for women who continue to be compelled by the cultural narrative that marriage promises but rarely delivers on, the question of whether or not she'll take his name will be frequently raised. Based on 2022 data, between 70 to 80% of American women in heterosexual relationships change their last names. To me, that is a glaringly obvious example of the fact that you can't change marriage from its original meaning of ownership. I cannot imagine anything more destructive to my sense of self than changing my name to someone else's. What else can that possibly signify than ownership? Like, why would I take a man's last name? That would ruin my entire sense of identity. As Clementine mentions, there's many excuses which are given for name changes, such as a dislike for your own family name or family origin, an overabundance of names that are apparently terribly difficult to spell, respect for your husband's cultural ties, or just a general ambivalence to your own given name. The biggest reason, though, is that they wanted to have the same last name as their children. Sorry, but last names should always be passed down maternally. Like, because the baby was literally inside its mother. Are you kidding? Like, a woman gives birth to a baby and then her husband slaps his own name on it. That doesn't make any sense. This also boils down again to the lie of choice feminism. You did not choose to take your husband's last name willingly. That choice was informed by patriarchal expectations and centuries of actual legal enforcement of name changing. Like, you can't separate yourself from that. And that's what pisses me off when, like, choice feminists are like, well, I chose to take his name. But you didn't, though. Like, that choice was informed by so many things which influenced you to do that. Clementine proceeds to mention instances of coverture. And even though coverture was technically, like, made illegal in, like, not made illegal, but, like, abolished in, like, the mid-1900s, it still exists. Like, for example, people addressing you as your husband's name, even if you didn't take it. Tradesmen asking to speak to the man of the house to make sure he approves. Medical professionals refusing to sterilize women who are asking for it because they don't have their husband's approval. Or more damagingly, unmarried women asking for tubal ligations and being told to consider the potential future non-existent yet husbands want for kids. Like, because my non-existent and never to exist future husband still owns partially my womb. Like, no. If I'm choosing to have, like, a medical reproductive surgery, why the fuck does a man that doesn't even exist yet or potentially will never exist have a hold on whether I do that or not? This ownership of women by men is implicit in every sphere and every scenario. It is upheld by the institution of marriage, still being allowed to thrive to at least some degree. Marriage is about ownership and always will be, and that's what allows these little acts of treating women like property to exist. Also, Clementine talks about the argument that, well, like, women also only ever have their father's last name. But this argument is silly because I've lived a whole life with that name and it's my name. Like, that's the name that I was given and it's the name that I've lived with and built an identity around. Men aren't branded with that same expectation of having their father's name because it's expected that they'll keep it and pass it on. Honestly, put so well by Enya, like Emergency Intercom Enya. She said, having kids and getting married to me is a death sentence. I'll date a man, like, yeah, whatever, let's have fun. You want to lock me away and hold me hostage and make me bear children? You're a fucking killer. And I love that clip because that's my exact opinion. It's just that choices can't be real, uninfluenced choices if they're not available to the same degree to all genders. Like, the impact of being married and having children on women is genuinely a death sentence in some cases. My life, my interests, my hobbies, my friendships, everything would be changed under the institution of getting married. I actually had a customer recently. I work in retail and I had a customer come in and it was like around the new year. So she was like, Happy New Year's. Like, do you have anything exciting happening this year, like marriage or children? I was like, first of all, do I look like a child bride to you? I'm 22, like, I'm a child. I'm not getting married or having children, like, oh my God. Anyway, I replied to her, I was like, I would rather die. Like, do not bring that into my workplace. And then she was like, oh no, don't say that. You know, I had the same opinions about marriage, but like, marriage can actually be lovely. Like, I've been married for 30 years now. You know, it finds you when you least expect it. Like, I bet you're going to find someone this year. I was like, do not put that curse on me. Like, she like, he'll seek you out. I was like, there better not be a man seeking me out to trap me into a marriage and make me bear children this year. Because if she's put a curse on me for that to happen, I'm really scared. Honestly, like, I need to do a whole episode on working in retail as a woman. Because not even like a few days ago, this old man came in And the first thing he said to me was, "Do you have children?" I was like, what the hell? What does that have to do with my job as a retail employee? Why are you asking me that, you freak? And it turns out it was because he wanted me to recommend him a game for a 6-year-old, which he was like, I thought, like maybe you might have a 6-year-old. I was like, you think I have a 6-year-old? You think I was pregnant at 16? Do I look like I was pregnant at 16? Like, I actually couldn't believe it. Anyway, I have so many instances of things like that happening to me, and it just like that ruins my whole day. Like, I'm already forced to be at work and now you're saying these things to me. Anyway, Clementine's book ends with such a fun little quote. She says, "No one will ever pin me down again, nor will I be forced into the straitjacket of marriage. Let them call me a witch, a demon, a miserable old hag, a crone, a rummy slut, a spinster, an old maid, a pitiful cat lady. These are just words they use to avoid calling me what I actually am, which is the thing that terrifies them most of all. Free. Yeah, period." Like, literally getting just cold insults consistently as I get older and I'm not married. Like, I'm gonna be expecting it, I think. But you know what? It's always by loser, freakish men who are just mad that women don't want them. So I'm okay with that. Anyway, I hope in this episode I have convinced you to not get married, or at least put you on the path of not getting married. I really, really recommend that you read Clementine Ford's book. She has a couple books actually. I've heard Boys Will Be Boys is really good as well. I haven't read it myself, but honestly, I just loved I Don't so much because it was so formative in not only teaching me feminist theory, but opening my eyes to the amount of patriarchal oppression that we're under and how so much of it is sold to us as a lie or something that we need and want. Like anything romantic, it's sold to you as something that is romanticized and something that you want yourself, and so it's a choice. You're choosing to do it. It's liberating or anything like that. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. Again, sorry I probably sound so sick. I have to edit out me coughing probably 20 times. So yeah, next episode I have a guest coming onto the podcast, and we're going to be talking about our experience growing up and being chronically online, and how that was actually a positive experience for us. So I hope you're excited for that episode. I am. I'll see you next week. Thank you so much for listening. Have an amazing week, and bye.